My name's Chad, and I'm here with Tyler. I'm going to talk for a couple minutes, but I want to give as much space for the work Tyler's been doing around gaming here as quick as possible. You Mac people, how do your slides go forward? There we go. There you go. Yeah, so my name's Chad. I've been at the Neil Squire Society for over 20 years now. So Neil Squire Society is a Canadian charity. We serve over 12,000 people a year across Canada, have a variety of programs. I've been fortunate enough to be a bit of an entrepreneur in the organization where I'll help get programs started, get them sort of up and off the ground, find smarter people than me to run at the ball and try to get out of their way. So Tyler, why don't you go ahead here?
Perfect. Hello. Yeah, I'm Tyler Fentie. I was one of the mechanical engineers on the team, still do some R&D work, but now I'm the game accessibility lead for the program. Located in the Calgary, Alberta office. I've been with Makers Making Change as a volunteer, and then while I was going through mechanical engineering school, was doing some of that work, and then now I'm leading that program. As you can see, I've been playing games for a long time. It's been a big part of my life. Got a photo there of a coordinated red jumpsuit with my Game Boy Color. I still try to coordinate my clothes with my games. Yeah, so around that time when I was 7 years old, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So I've been using assistive technology, medical devices my whole life. And living in a rural place, I grew up in northern Canada. It was hard to get a lot of assistive devices. So me and my dad, through a lot of, duct tape and super glue, customized a lot of my devices. And then now I've been continuing that work into 3D printing, various pieces like that. So there's a photo there of how I travel with my insulin to keep it cool with a little 3D printed base in a mug. So the commercial solution, again, very expensive. That is a couple dollars. And the 3D printed parts is about 30 cents. So good solution there. Yeah, thanks.
So I'll just talk for a couple of minutes about Neil Squire and Makers Making Change. History doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes. We're seeing that in our Makers Making Change program and again in gaming. And then I'll let Tyler kind of do the deep dive and some of the work we've been doing around gaming through our sort of different program models. So Neil Squire was a university student. He had a spinal cord injury right at the C1, C2 level. So tetraplegic, couldn't move any part of his body, difficult time speaking. So a couple of summer students worked with him and an engineer out of University of British Columbia, and they created a sip and puff system where the sips and puffs became Morse code, dots and dashes. And then they wrote some software to connect that to a state-of-the-art Apple IIe computer. So Neil, by sipping and puffing on a tube, could fully control his computer and started create documents, was always able to communicate clearly, really sort of gave him the ability to speak back. So they did that system for Neil. They thought, great, Neil has some independence again, but the other people, the rehab hospitals, like, well, I don't need a sip and puff system, but I want to use computers too, and I can't, keyboard well, or I need this other sort of accommodation. So started this organization or how technology could help empower people with disabilities. And the technology continues to change. Tara was talking a little bit earlier how sometimes there's this new innovation in technology which creates these more immersive experiences for many people. But that can also sometimes leave people with disabilities behind. And that became some of our work here with the lip sync. I'll hold up here in a second, where, smartphones sort of changed the way we worked. This system here is not going to plug in or be portable with you, right? So as technology emerges, it sometimes creates a new divide for people. So it's been a big focus in our work, trying to close that digital divide and make sure people with disabilities have the opportunities to be included. So again, we're a big organization. For the government of Canada, we run the largest program to help people get back to work. For some of the governments, we run different assistive technology programs. So if you have a job, you're able to get the accommodations you need to work. Sorry, move into the camera. But a lot of our work's really bottom line by collaboration. So the work we're going to talk a bit about here is our Makers Making Change, but it's all lines right back to our mission statement, how technology, knowledge, and passion can empower people with disabilities. So Makers Making Change started with, I'll grab this for the webcam here too. We won a Google Innovation Grant to create the lip sync, which is basically a mouth operated control system. So you can move the joystick up, down, left, right with your mouth, sip and puff to left click, right click. The current systems all have to be plugged into a wall. So that was our pitch to Google, was like, let's make something that works with your damn phone so that people that can't use their hands can use a touchscreen device. But what we did differently is we released it open source. So you can go to our website and see, like, here's the code for the Arduino, here's the bill of materials, here's an instruction guide how to build it, and to try to help people be able to sort of fabricate this more affordably. and we built a request system. So maybe not all occupational therapists or people with disabilities are as dorky as us and have a 3D printer in their house. So they can request one of the devices, then a volunteer from the community can help fulfill that sort of piece. What we've seen as we sort of built these up in the device library was the big lack of availability in gaming. You think your video game controller is literally one size fits all, which does not really work for the spectrum of people of disabilities. So if you take a look at the Make and Change website, you'll see a lot of the more recent products are really gaming focused. And I think the other part that's really important is not everything that's on the website is designed by Neil Squire engineers or makers making change interns. Over half the things on the website come from the community. We've had our most popular Switch was designed by a parent of a kid who was tired of spending another $100 on the Switch every time the cord got pulled on. A number of the video game controller designs came from a different design contest, but we tried to do work sort of really curating that stuff and building that catalog of open source, affordable solutions for people. So I'll get out of the way and let Taylor talk, or sorry, Tyler, Christ's sakes, talk. But I think there's sort of three main benefits to our model. One is the affordability. So much assistive technology can cost hundreds of dollars. And these things can be 3D printed for literally nickels on the dollar. So there's a big affordability aspect. The scalability is another thing. We find even in urban centers, there's a lack of sort of people to have the resources to get things. But when you start to go into rural communities, while there may not be an occupational therapist or a child rehab hospital in the community, there's going to be a 3D printer in a library or in a school. So there's the ability to really get solutions to people in their community. And then the customizability, anything that you sort of create, it's going to be close, but maybe not quite perfect. So you can kind of do that rapid iteration and tweaking. I've told a couple stories here to different people over it. Like we were able to 3D print switches that are pink. You know what I mean? You're not going to be able to buy those anywhere, but for certain people, they want their stuff pink. So it doesn't have to look like this big medical device. You can actually think about aesthetics and their personality and things that motivate them to participate. So I'll get out of Tyler's way here and let you talk about more of the gaming work.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, Chad. And yeah, along with all those devices, we have over 200 devices now on the website, from different grip aids, adapted toys, switches, various pieces there. And then a lot of the work that we've been doing recently is in gaming. So thinking about what our role is in gaming, where do we play a part in this, kind of goes back to what Chad was talking about with the lip sync, one of our first devices out there that also came with one of our first gaming devices. So we made a mode on that lip sync where you can use as a gaming joystick and map that sip and puff to A and B or X and Y, whatever someone wants as well. And all of our work, is very user driven. So especially when the Xbox adaptive controller came out, right from that time, looking for peripherals, low cost options, customizable options to that. That was where a lot of our gaming work started. However, in the last 2 years, since the beginning, we've been answering this question a lot, but put a lot of effort into answering this question the last 2 years of, I don't know where to start. So hearing this from a variety of folks, clinicians that are working with gamers in rehab centers, community centers like librarians, or various people in the community that are working with gamers for solutions, and then players themselves too, of wondering what technology is out there and what's available. So we have 4 main ways that we go about answering this question lately, starting with gamers and players, working with them to answer that question, designing and developing various assistive technologies, creating accessible gaming spaces, and working with the game industry directly. So I'll go into each of these here. So starting with the players. This is a photo here of a Zoom call with myself, Carrie Lynn, which was one of our previous interns, and then 2 gamers, Keegan and Cameron. So this is a nice time after we got them all set up with gear. We had a little Brawlhalla battle one evening. There's a video online you can watch of that. But yeah, mainly the way that this works is a one-on-one session with gamers, either virtually or in person, where we can suggest options, suggest assistive technology, work with them directly, starting with their gaming goal. So that's a big piece that we've worked on, is figuring out what someone wants to do, what they can do, and then working backwards on the assistive technology piece to figure out what that looks like and how that suits them, and then meeting them where they're at in their gaming journey too. So in R&D development, the two main things that we work on are alternative inputs. So those are assistive switches, joysticks, sip and puff devices, various pieces there. There's a video playing using our assistive switches and joysticks with the Xbox adaptive controller, Bluetooth to my phone playing Brawlhalla. And then the other one is modified controllers. So using 3D printing or changing where the mounting is of a controller. So if it's difficult for someone to hold that controller, they're able to, maybe mount that on an arm that's sticking out, various pieces like that. And there's lots of creativity in this. And as Chad mentioned, designers are coming up with this all the time. Caleb Craft, the controller project, various pieces that people are putting out these controller modifications open source, so we can link them on our website as well too. So big thank you to them on that. And the big push for R&D lately has been our accessible joysticks. So around a couple of the tables here, if you want to check out online, these just launched this last week. So we created a variety of different accessible joysticks. And the main goal here is to have them both be able for mice control or mouse control, as well as gaming all in one joystick. So through a grant with the government in Canada, lately over the last couple of months, we're able to develop a range of these. So, nunchuck style, a bigger type of joystick, a PS4 style joystick, and a couple different other alternatives there. Again, we can build these in classrooms, teach kids about STEM activities, and then get these out into the world. The big need for joysticks in Canada is if you're looking to get an accessible setup and you have the switches, but you're needing joysticks for movement, you're looking at hundreds of dollars for a commercial assistive joystick, and oftentimes they don't work directly with the gaming console software. So this will be one of the main ways that people can access joysticks now in Canada. It's talking about accessible gaming spaces. So in the end of last year, we started this program called Game Checkpoints. It stands for Gaming Accessibility Made for Everyone. And the goal here is to work with clinical spaces, educational spaces, like your community centers, schools, that kind of thing. And then game industry folks to create accessible gaming spaces within their center. So I got a photo here, a collage of the 4 different centers that we started with, one being in Vancouver, one being in Toronto, and then one being in Fredericton, and then the gaming studio Eidos in Montreal. We just added one to the list. Last week I was in Edmonton and we launched it at the Glenrose Rehab Center. The Glenrose is the largest rehab center in Canada. So yeah, thank you. So lots of different folks that we've been working with here. Another photo here of some of the centers that we worked with and collaborated with other folks that are doing this work. So thank you to them. So how does an accessible gaming space get started and kind of what is it? I want to get into that a little bit here. So firstly, when we're wanting to launch a space, we have to supply the center with the accessible gaming gear. So we're thinking about assistive technology, but as well as consoles, controllers, that kind of thing. So with those 4 initial centers, we're able to donate over $10,000 of tech to each center to get them started around this technology. Again, a lot of clinicians aren't gamers themselves, so we had to train them on how to, turn on the Xbox, like starting at that level and then going into the gaming pieces as well. So full day of training on the gear as well as assistive technology, and then having that continued support, which I think is a really important piece where there's lots of siloing that happens in the medical industry as well. When there's different programs starting up. So these folks can all now communicate with each other and develop these programs as time goes on with us. So there's lots of different reasons why these accessible gaming spaces are important. I'm going to start with 2 of them here, the significance of gaming and the cost of gaming. So when we think about the significance of gaming, the big thing here is, again, we're hearing this question, I don't know where to start, from lots of different folks. So if we start at the clinician level, they're hearing it from clients that are coming in maybe post-injury that want to get back to gaming. They're looking for that experience. And if they don't have the tools or knowledge to develop it, it doesn't really go anywhere. So they want to be able to support clients in their gaming goals, what they want to do to decrease that social isolation as well. And thinking about gaming as a standard offering in the hospitals in Canada or worldwide as well. Currently, right now, if someone is into sports, maybe football, and then has an accident, goes into a rehab center, one of the first goals of care in a recreation therapy setting will be adaptive sports. However, if you think about someone that's a gamer, that's where that ends, is that idea piece, maybe some links, those kind of things. But these spaces can offer an opportunity to trial these devices, have that experience in center, and then get those devices when they leave as well. So that brings us to the cost of gaming. So again, each of these centers is about $10,000 to get a whole setup that's going to be able to replicate most people's setup at home. So those are all the different platforms, all the different kind of controllers, things like that. So you need this much setup to be able to trial the variety of what someone may need at home. If someone is going to do this work by themselves at home, if they need a new setup, that's going to cost them about $3,000 for one individual. About $1,000 of that is just gaming gear, console, controller, Wi-Fi, all that kind of stuff. But the $2,000 of that, still the majority, is the assistive technology portion. So without trialing these options, if you're about to drop $3,000 in a bunch of new gaming gear that you don't know is going to work, the likelihood of that happening is very low. So being able to go into these centers, try these options, gives the user more confidence, and they can get these devices at a lower cost through the maker model that Chad talked about. So brief mention on some resources. So the way we started in this work at the beginning of 2 years ago, we started with a kind of crash course online resource set here on the intro to adaptive gaming, what tech's out there, that kind of thing. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel here. It's lots of great work from game accessibility nexus, special effect, and can I play that? So a lot of those resources are linked in here, but was really just to be able to share that with our community that were asking that question of where to start. We had somewhere to point them to. After that, through the game checkpoints, again, we like to keep everything open source. So I had to create a bunch of training manuals for them and reference guides. Those are all freely available online as well, too, if you're interested in taking a look at those. The goal of this booklet set here is in a gaming session, a clinician can reference this if they're looking for, what solutions they want to try with the gamer. So maybe they need the Xbox adaptive controller to connect to the Nintendo Switch, and they have a bunch of adapters in front of them to make that happen. Instead of Googling which one works with what, they can reference that guide quickly, figure out what adapter they need, and to speed up those assessments as well as keep that, knowledge in their back pocket. So I'll talk about our friend Anton here to kind of exemplify the power of what these centers can do here. So Anton, a year ago, had a stroke. He's located in Vancouver. So he went into the GF Strong Rehab Center. At the time, they had a dusty Xbox in the corner that had got donated that no one had to use forever. Anton's big goal going into that assistive technology center at the end of his care, where they do smart home devices, those kind of things, was gaming. A lot of his experience at home and a lot of the way that he connects with his friends is through playing first-person shooters, playing Overwatch. So that was his goal. That's what he wanted to get done with the center. And with that Xbox that they had in the corner, kind of within the resources they had at the time, they figured out that racing games were a really good option for Anton because he could play with one hand, have the steering and the gas and brake all on the back trigger, so you can play the game fully independently with one hand. However, I mentioned Overwatch, and that was what his goal was. So he's been playing racing games for a year. It wasn't really what he wanted to be doing. He wanted to get back into those other pieces. So this is kind of that idea that we work with the centers on of, someone's ability does not equal the experience that they want to have in the game. You want to eventually get to that goal that they're working on and kind of work backwards on the technology. So his current setup at home was a PlayStation 5 using a DualSense controller. And we're able to replicate that here, pairing a DualSense controller to a PC. And we first started with the setup that he currently had at home. So there's a video of Anton balancing the PS5 controller on his right thigh, playing with his right hand on the controller. So this is how he was playing racing games at home, and this led to a lot of fatigue. He was only able to play for about an hour, and as well wasn't the genre of game that he wanted to play either. So utilizing an open source design from designer Akaki, which is a one-handed controller modification for the PS5, and then a ball and socket mounting plate on the table. We're able to switch this design, within 15 minutes of him coming in the center. We snapped on that controller modification, and now he was playing games, fully one-handed, utilizing the whole controller, and we're able to test out games using Portal 2 as a first-person shooter simulation here. So this is a video after. I only got a video of him playing the racing game, but if you look really closely, or I'll describe the video here, where when he wants to press the left side of the controller, he's able to use that beige 3D print and actually press the left side of the controller using just his right hand there. So as a test, going back to that racing game and seeing if that solution will be able to allow Anton to use the whole controller there. So the outcomes of our Game Checkpoints program. So at the end of the year, we'll have over 100 gamers served in these centers. And then now with the unexpected Glenrose edition, I'm sure that number will go up. And outside of those Game Checkpoint spaces, we have over 5 centers using those online booklet resources that we put together to create their own spaces. And when we have joystick designs or various gaming devices that we're coming out with, we now have a place to be able to get accurate feedback on those devices, because before, it's quite difficult if you don't have a place to get access to users and have that user design, if there's not very many gamers that you can source that information from, of course. So talking about the game industry here, what this work is around, we piloted this with ADOS Montreal, and the big work here is training. Instead of training clinicians on gaming, it's the reverse, where now we're training the people that make the games on assistive technology. So these pieces of working with user research teams, game devs, making them aware of what options are available and out there for folks that may not be using standard controllers to play, as well as getting more players in the playtesting studio using non-standard controllers, so you can test accessibility options, with players that are not using those controllers, or have a wider variety of playtesting clients. So a couple lessons learned here and roadblocks that we're still kind of working through that I wanted to mention. We've been talking about, progress is still important. So I wanted to, end this piece on how, current things that we're working through. So parachuting assistive technology into someone's life is often not helpful. So if you have, an individual that we're working with that may be on the other side of the country, if I just send them a joystick, it doesn't solve all the problems. It's that consistent working with clients, especially in rehab centers, having a place for those folks to go as well, especially when we talk about the rural case of users. Clinicians have systemic problems preventing from expanding their programs. The huge one here of internet access. I know I'm not a game designer myself, but you guys love to make updates for games. And if they're working with a client the next day and an update comes up, that update could take them 2 days to install on the Wi-Fi. So that could, limit their experience from working with that client. If they're traveling from a long location, that planning element can be difficult. And as well with that journey that we're on to get more players with disabilities in play tests, around IP roadblocks and some of that stuff, as we're not from, directly that gaming background, we're still working through some of those pieces. And then as well, getting our information that we've heard from clients and clinicians to influence game design, still figuring out that work of how do we share that knowledge with you? How do we share, what we're hearing? What are the best places for that? So again, I know we have time after this and information in the Discord. So please share with me if you ever have any ideas of how to get that information out there that we're hearing from our folks directly to you. So let Chad here talk about what's next for the program.
I can't believe we got through it. Tyler's like, how long are you going to take? I go, just a couple minutes, but he knows me and I'm very verbose and talk too long. So you did awesome getting through all that with me sandwiching around you. Yeah, I mean, just a couple of key points on that. Well, we're based in Canada. The Makers model being open source has led to a lot of international collaboration. We now have over 30 volunteer maker chapters throughout the States. Those aren't all 3D printing geeks. Some of them are clinicians that need stuff. Some are these magical unicorns that are into like technology development and printing. and work as occupational therapists, but lots of opportunities to get involved or help lead this at the local level. One of the big pieces that we've sort of really seen the success that we've had is in doing this sort of training and have people coming in, and we have you have able gamers here in the States and they do some of this work. Special Effects in UK does some of this work, but there's no one doing this in Canada. So there's a big gap that we're trying to help close that divide. And we're really fortunate to have a strong engineering team with a library of hundreds of different devices, and then this community that helps not just build these devices, but also shares their designs forward. So if you come across something that you're using or they think would be a good solution, please share it forward. Our library is all well documented. Here's how you build it. Here's how you use it. Here's the parts. But there's also design challenges where people are not finding what they need, and they can post that. And those also get taken on by our community. But I recognize we're close at time, and want to thank all of you, both in person and online. I know 2 days is long for sticking here with us, but we have a lot. Tyler's done week-long trainings on this stuff. We've done, keynotes at conferences and sessions. So feel free to talk to us about it. But we really have this vision where longer term, we want to create the center of excellence where game developers can come and learn this sort of stuff. We're going to have that sort of co-design process with people with disabilities and make this sort of piece. And there's lots of opportunities to get involved. So we're running, and excited to announce, not sure if everyone from EA that's here in the room and online is aware of this, but we're doing one of our joystick builds with EA Vancouver on Thursday. And it'll be to the best of our knowledge, our 10,000th device has been built by one of our community build events and gone out, but we know there's a lot more out there. I've gotten pictures from people, and that's just what we can track. Like, I've gotten pictures from people in Korea that have built stuff, and I have no idea who they are. We came up with this Japanese design book. So the benefit of sort of doing open source and giving it away is it goes much further than you think you could sort of do. So if you're interested in getting involved, we're in the middle of a campaign where we're looking to build 2,000 switches, adaptive joysticks, and adapt toys, and give them all for free to Rehab Center across Canada. So if you want to get involved, you can scan the QR code, check out the website, and I'll stop being the person that's in the middle between you and the happy hour that precedes us. So to us about this. Thank you very much, and for the opportunity to share our work. Thank you.